I feel like I can't hear myself, but you say it's fine, right? It's fine. Okay. How embarrassing is it if in a class about memory, I have to remind myself what I'm supposed to say? Okay, I wanted to say two things really that are related and connected, and then we'll kind of set the tone for what we want to do today, what I hope we will do together today. And what I want to set out there is that Chodesh Cheshvan happens to be one of my favorite months of the year, partly because it's my birthday month, partly because it's a month where you have 4 weeks of work uninterrupted, without kids missing school. And partly because even though it doesn't have big holidays or fast days or any famous, big festivals, it does have several what I think are gems of the Jewish calendar, like days that invite us to reflect on things that are not as flashy and big as Yetziat Mitzrayim, or well, I don't know exactly what you think about in Sukkot, but whatever it is you think about in Sukkot, it's a little more subtle, more minor key, to badly use musical terms, but no less important. One of them is today, Zayin Cheshvan, the 7th day of the month of Cheshvan, when we actually fully start davening for rain. And I think this is an important day because it's like a constant reminder, a tangible, real reminder of how we manage our relationship with God. Namely, not in a disconnect from our relationship with other people. I'll explain. Shmini Atzeret is the day when we start saying Mashiv Ruach Umorid Gashem. We declare that God is the one who gives us rain. And frankly, as anyone who ever got wet on Sukkot in their sukkah knows, it is in fact the season, right? In Israel, that is the season. Shmini Atzeret is indeed the season when it starts raining. A few days before, a few days after. Somewhere around that region. And yet, we don't ask for rain. We declare that God is the one who gives us rain. We acknowledge that this is the time of the year when rain is supposed to come. Those of us who are farmers, is there any farmer in the room? I think the answer would have been different 2,000 years ago. Those of us who are farmers already start worrying about the rain. And I have to tell you, actually, I saw today an ad being passed on social media from women in the Golan who are very concerned because last year was a famine in the Golan and a lot of the agriculture there faltered. They didn't meet their quotas. They had, what did I say? Sorry, thank you. Drought, Batzoret. And they're asking people to start davening for rain now, like with intention, adding Tehillim, doing all kinds of things, because they say our fields, our orchards, more like need rain, and now is the time. So even though there's this, when you're a farmer and you're dependent on it, there's this sense of urgency already. And even though this is the right time in the calendar, and even though we already started declaring God as He who gives us rain, we withhold the request until Cheshvan, the 7th of Cheshvan, because we don't want those pilgrims who came to the Mikdash for Sukkot to get wet, to get drenched on the way back. And Chazal declared that 7th of Cheshvan should be enough time for even people who live on the Euphrates to make it all the way there. Sorry, it really irritates me. I'm sorry. To people who live in the Euphrates to make it all the way there. So that's why they set it as that day. So even the farmer in the Golan or in Judea, right, who is anxiously waiting for rain to start growing so he can have the produce he needs, is withholding their own desire, is withholding asking God for it in order to make room for the needs and interests of our fellow Jews. Now, Chazal are very careful not to take it to the other extreme. They have all kinds of stories about people who didn't want rain for personal reasons and prayed for it, and how not okay that is, because in the season for rain, the interests of the collective takes precedence over your simcha or your journey that you want to take, or whatever it is that you would really rather not do wet. Let's put it this way. However, on a collective level, when there's so many pilgrims on the road, we are taking into account. Now, I'm telling you things you already know. Why am I reiterating that? I'm reiterating that because by shaping the calendar in this way, Chazal are addressing a practical conundrum, right? When should we pray for rain? But at the same time, they're baking into our very calendar, the way we manage time, the way we manage our daily prayers, an awareness that our relationship with God requires also our relationship with other people, that God intends for us to be considerate of other people. And that just because something is true, it's true that this is the season for rain. It's true that God is the one who Meshiva Ruach Marida Geshem in this season. Doesn't mean that we have to kind of, in the name of this truth, be inattentive to other people's needs. I feel like I have to say it, and then I'm going to set current events aside. I have to say it. I feel like we need this reminder. I feel like we hold certain truths very passionately. Unfortunately, sometimes not the same truths. And a lot of times the discourse in Israeli society, in the world right now, it's a very polarizing moment everywhere. In the name of this truth, we want this truth to win completely. We want to convince or override the people who disagree with us so passionately that in the name of this truth, in the name of what's just, in the name of what's right. And maybe our calendar is telling us, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe it's the truth. Maybe you're even correct, but can you be considerate? As you apply this truth, can you make space for the needs and interests and understanding of other people? So this is one of the gems of Chodesh Cheshvan. The other gem of Chodesh Cheshvan is the Yortzeit of Rachel Imenu, which will be next week. And in honor of Rachel Imenu, I decided to dedicate this lesson to memory, as it plays a role in her life and long after her death. I'm not going to elaborate because the work we'll do together today will answer what I mean by that. But I do want to say, and it's a little bit of a teaser and a promise, that I think those 2 days are connected. There's something about the theme of Zayin Cheshvan and the theme of Rachel and Rachel's memory and what we think about when we think about her that go together. And we will get to that later today. We will get to the connection between rain and asking for rain and being considerate while we ask for rain, and Rachel Imeinu's life as we get to it later. I want to do another thing that's a little bit unusual today, and instead of doing it chronologically, meaning like looking at ways memory interacts with her life from beginning to end, I want to start with the end. I want to start with the end, look at it by itself, and then go back to the way memory plays a role earlier in her life and see if it sheds new light on the ending. So I'm going to ask you to go to the last box in your source sheet. To the very, very famous words in Yirmiyahu. We read part of the same chapter last week when we talked about Haben Yakir li Ephraim. There too, the theme of memory was important. We talked about how God, when he thinks of Ephraim, what happens? What does he remember? How the thinking of someone beloved brings up memories of good things, even when the person went astray. Earlier in the same chapter, we have another moment where somebody, in this case Rachel Imenu, reminds God of something, even though the word memory doesn't appear explicitly, it's clearly about memory, so we'll count it. Reminds God of something, and that changes or shapes God's way of interacting with us through history. So let's read it in the Hebrew first and then discuss. Ko amar Hashem, kol barama nishma. A cry is heard in Ramah. Nehi, bechi, tamrurim, wailing, bitter weeping. Rachel mevaka al banea. Rachel weeping for her children. Me'ana lehenachem al banea ki einenu. She refuses to be comforted for her children who are gone. Now, the first question, there's many questions that can be asked just about this pasuk, just about Yirmiyahu 31:15. I think one of the questions that many Parshanim got stuck on is, where is it that her voice is being heard? And we'll circle back to that later. And who are her children who are gone? I mean, we know her historical children, right? There's Yosef, who was indeed gone for a long time, but she wasn't there to witness it. It was after her death. And Binyamin. So who are her sons who are gone? Now, this is not actually our focal point, so I'll just say very briefly that the two questions are related. Because when Chazal were trying to understand what's happening here, they're saying, okay, so she is standing somewhere, right, and crying near Ramah. Now, Ramah is a place. That's where Shmuel HaNavi came from. But let's say it's that. We know she's buried in Efrat, right, which is to the south of Jerusalem, not to the north of Jerusalem. So shouldn't she be there? Where is her voice heard? And they tied their answer to it to the question.
What time are we going to go?
Are the sons she's crying for? Because what they tried to portray, kind of the image they tried to paint
I'm going to
for
have a
us
shower.
is
The
of a
restaurant
woman,
fancy.
spirit of a woman.
Why come I got to go in gym clothes?
Excuse me,
I have to get changed. I need a shower in any case.
Just mute yourself.
You are?
We'll reopen for discussion later, but for now, please.
It's
mute
all right. No, it's not terrible.
Or in the
I don't
office,
think it's so
can you
bad.
please mute everybody?
It's shade color, but at least it's all one color.
It's okay. It's hard. It's hard. You don't always see that that's what's happening. I have a lot of experiences on the other end of that. A woman who stands and watches as her sons are being taken away from her. In other words, for Chazal, this image is not just Rachel crying in theory about an abstract sense of loss, but rather witnessing her sons being taken into Galut. The problem with that is that Kever Rachel is in the wrong way. You don't pass through Bethlehem to go to Bavel, for example. It's just not the right direction. I mean, you might, but it'll be unwise of you. The very scenic view. So, and therefore they came up with all kinds of answers. Some actually said that when it says Berama, it means Berama, even though she's not buried there. And some traditions actually say she is buried there. And where we go, my daughter went this week to Kever Rachel, is just a mistake in identification. Some people think that Rachel is buried near Ramah, more on the way north, partly in order to explain how can she witness the Galut going up north. Others people say that maybe it talks about there are two instances where Jews were taken that way into slavery or Galut. One is after Retzach Gedalia. If you recall, after Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple, took really the majority of everybody in Israel into Babylon. Very few people were left under the leadership of Gedalia ben Achikam, who was a puppet leader, in a sense, appointed by the Babylonians. He was murdered by a fellow Jew, and then in a moment of panic and being afraid of reprisals from Babylon, the Jews who were left here against Jeremiah's advice and urging, basically packed and went south to Egypt and were never heard from again. So maybe it's these people that are going south through Efrat, through that direction. And there is some logic to that interpretation because that was the final nail in the kind of in a coffin of Jewish settlement in Israel in the first home temple, in the first temple period. That was it. That was the last Galut. So we could say that she watches the last ones leaving and she's crying for everybody. Another direction that is more controversial is after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, many Jews who were captured in retaliation by the Romans, not only people who were combatants, just everybody, were taken to a slave market in the south. So that's another possibility, that these are the sons. It's more controversial because it's really far away. It really, like most of Jeremiah's prophecies, seem to apply to the destruction of the first temple and promises of return after the first temple. It's hard to say, oh, it's about this very specific event that happened after the destruction of the second temple. And that's when Rachel starts crying for us. I'm sorry, this was a little bit of a rabbit hole because it's not really relevant for the issue of memory, but let's continue in verse 16. כה אמר השם, מנעי קולך מבכי. Restrain your voice from weeping, ועינייך מדמעה, your eyes from shedding tears. כי יש שכר לפעולתך נאום השם, ושבו מארץ אויב. Because there is a reward for your labor, declared God, they shall return from the enemy land. ויש תקווה לאחריתך, there is hope for your future, נאום השם, ושבו בנים לגבולה. Your children shall, your sons, the sons will return to their country. These words, of course, are now everywhere on signs, right? ושבו בנים לגבולה. The question I want to focus on is, why is God responding this way to Rachel? I will go out on a limb and say that many Jewish mothers cried for their children being taken into slavery during the generations. And if we want to say that a dead woman, forgive the bluntness, right? If we want to say the spirit of Rachel cried, I'm sure all the mothers, all the matriarchs, all the patriarchs, all the leaders of the Jewish people throughout history were crying and weeping to watch their children, their future, going into exile. Why is God responding to Rachel of all of them? What is it about Rachel? Now, it's not just responding. It says very directly, Ki yesh sachar lifulatech, right? There's a reward for what you've done. So the text, without explicating what this pe'ula is that deserves a reward, makes it very clear that it's not just that God is feeling pity or sympathy to Rachel. It's that God feels like she deserves this promise. She deserves restitution for her children for something she did. Now, the famous midrashic answer, which is quoted in Rashi here in the second source and in Agadah Bereshit in the third source, it's a very famous answer, right? So I'm just going to put it out there directly, that it's about her not only not speaking up when her sister was given in her place, right? That when years earlier, when she was betrothed to Yaakov and he worked for 7 years for her and he said, now is my time to marry the daughter you promised me, Lavan brought in Leah instead. And only in the morning Yaakov found out, and that's why he had to work another 7 years for Rachel, and that's why he had multiple wives and all the problems that came from it, all the struggles and all the issues between the brothers, all the history of the enmity and jealousy between the sons of Rachel and the sons of Leah that shaped our history, that brought us into Egypt. All of this starts on that night when Leah is brought instead of Rachel into Yaakov's bedroom, forgive me. And the Midrash says that Rachel and Yaakov suspected Lavan might do something like that. I mean, he's a cheat. He's well known for it. It's not exactly shocking that he will try to get something out of it. And they developed a system of simanim, some sort of signs between them. And Rachel gave it to her sister. Let's read the Rashi. I think the Rashi explains it very clearly. I'm going to read in English now, the second source in the fourth box. Rachel weeping for her children. The Midrash Agadah states that the patriarchs and matriarchs went to appease the Holy One, blessed he, be he, concerning the sin of Menashe. King Menashe, father, son, thank you, King Chizkiyahu, who placed image in the temple, but he was not appeased. That was the moment, by the way, Jeremiah says it directly, even in Melachim it says that was the moment God decided about the exile. It was quite a while before exile, but that was the moment when the kind of the writ was made final. that this is not a society that can be redeemed. They need to be made to go into exile and return from there. Rachel entered and stated before him, O Lord of the universe, whose mercy is greater, your mercy or the mercy of a flesh and blood person? You must admit that your mercy is greater. Now, did I not bring my rival into my house? For all the work that Jacob worked for my father, he worked only for me. When I came to enter the nuptial canopy, they brought my sister, and it was not enough that I kept my silence, but I gave her my password. That's how they translate simanim. You too, if your children have brought your rival into your house, keep your silence for them. He said to her, You have defended them well. There is reward for your deed and for your righteousness that you gave over your password, your simanim, to your sister. It's a very famous answer, to the point that I asked my little kids who barely know anything about Rachel and Yaakov, but they know this story. Like this story they know, because it's like so powerful. It takes such a powerful place in the Jewish imagination over the generations. The problem is that there's no trace of it in the Pshat. Like in the Pshat, there's zero trace of simanim involved in any way, shape, or form. And in many ways, it almost seems as if Chazal came up with this story in order to explain the passage in Jeremiah of Yesh Sachar Lefulatech. So it's a weird answer. It's like, why do they need to come up with this answer? Is that really the best they can come up with? What is going on here? So I want to open the question a little bit. We saw the traditional answer. The traditional answer is Rachel is answered, even though all the matriarchs and patriarchs are crying. And by the way, there's other midrashim that go in length about Avraham arguing the case and saying, I withheld Rachamim from my son on your behalf, and Yaakov arguing the case, and Moshe arguing the case, and God rejects all of them, but accepts Rachel and then some midrashim Yitzchak. So according to the Midrash, it has to do with Rachel giving the simanim. But I want to set aside this answer for a second and ask more generally. When you think about Rachel, about her life, about what she endured, what she achieved, why do you think God takes her tears so seriously? Can we think of other answers other than what the Midrash says? Yes.
More children, like she even died in childbirth. I mean, she wanted to be a productive mother in Israel, and unfortunately, she didn't succeed, and she didn't succeed in seeing children develop. So it's something every mother wants.
Let me repeat what you said for the Zoom, and then I have to ask a follow-up question. You're saying that Rachel is a tragic figure in a sense because she really, really wanted to build the next generation. We know that. She was watching as her sisters got pregnant and her sister got pregnant, gave birth, got pregnant, gave birth, as her maidservant get pregnant, gave birth, as the Leah's maidservant gave birth, Zilpah, and she could not get pregnant. She was barren. And when she came to Yaakov and says, Havali banim ki im ayin meta anochi, give me children or I'm dead, he kind of said, what, am I God to give you children? Like, we see here a woman who's desperate to be part of building the next generation, and finally has her son Yosef, and when she tries for another child, dies in childbirth. So her ability to populate the world, like lifot v'lirabot, and to take care of her children and watch them grow, is very, very limited. And it leaves her as this figure of craving a mother's role. But how does that answer the question? That was the follow-up question.
Since that God has, she has mercy on Jewish children in a sense, it's beyond even an ordinary person because of her what she didn't succeed in doing, her sorrow for what happened to other Jewish children is even perhaps greater, because she herself didn't fulfill part of this. And so I think her empathy and her grief are able to feel for all this is so much more that she wants to see them back in Eretz Yisrael.
So I'll take that, but I'll rephrase it a little bit. In a sense, what you're saying is that she put all this energy out into the world of wanting to take care of children and sorrow over what happens to not have, like the lack of children and children being gone before they're even existent. They're not there. And in a sense, so in her life had more to do with craving and suffering than they had with actual childbearing and, you know, taking care of children as they grow up and raising them and caring for them beyond that. And it's almost as if this energy remains. Forgive the new age terminology. It's almost as if this energy remains and she becomes a channel, a symbol, a patron, to use a more Christian term, forgive me, of this desire, this worry about children who are gone. And then when children are gone down history, gone to exile, gone to slavery, her concern continues hunting us in a sense. You and then you, yes.
Struck me the first time and reading and learning this, but the Mab said they weren't her children. They were her sisters and her, well, they were her sister's children mainly. The ones who went out that she's crying for. They're not her children, and yet she's still crying for them, even though they really weren't hers.
You're pointing out something really beautiful and powerful, that Rachel becomes the mother of all the children. That if it's Shevet Yehuda that goes into Galut, right, which is most likely the case where she is, it's not her child. It's her sister's child. But in her care and also in her reward, she becomes mother of all. Some Pashanim don't see it this way. Some Pashanim really think that this is about the Galut of Ephraim, that this is about Ephraim. This is a very rare Parshanut because, again, it has to do with where we're placing her on the map.
Benjamin, I would accept it, but I'm not so sure about that.
Because of Ramah, because Ramah is closer to Ephraim. So that's why they say, Kol Nishma Barama, what are we talking about? And then the next passage in Jeremiah is about Ben Yakir li Ephraim. So there is a interpretive direction that limits it, that says it's really her children. I like your direction better, and in fact, that is what most Parshanim go with. Yes, and then you.
Signs and all of that, because we don't have that in the actual sense, but the fact that she davened, she prayed for so long that even Yaakov said, I'm not God, pray God. I think that might have been the Kulan that Yirmiyahu was.
So you're raising a very important possibility, and it's a possibility we're going to keep coming back to today. You're saying maybe instead of reading it as yesh sachar lif'ulatech, in the sense that you did something in your, life that earned a favor from God caring for her children, maybe the pe'ula is the crying itself. Now, the crying can't be the crying she did in her lifetime, right? In her lifetime, she prayed for children and wanted children and asked for children and cried for it, etc. Or it can be the crying she does here, right? Kol barama nishma, nehi bechit amrorim, Rachel mevaka al banea. She is crying. She's refusing to be apathetic or to just be accepting and say, Gamzu letova, right? This is for the good, or just, okay, this is what God's will is, so I guess we have to submit to it. Her grief is a defiance of reality as it is. And in a sense, that could be the thing that is rewarded. And we'll come back to that because that is a real possibility that runs throughout her lifetime. Mm-hmm.
She asked Yaakov.
No, she doesn't say she'll kill herself. She says, Hava li banim ve'im ayin meta anochi. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not prophetic. It's the opposite. When she gets children, she dies. She dies in childbirth. But I will say that, and I do want to say that, and then I want to hear your point. But I think our Rabbanit Aviva Zornberg, in her analysis of that story that you're referring to, where Rachel comes in despair to Yaakov and says, "Give me children, or I'm dead." Rabbanit Aviva Zornberg points out that, we kind of look at it and we're like, oh, it's hyperbole. It's like, if I don't get this pizza, I'm gonna die. How many times have you heard a teenager saying something like that? I hear a lot of it. I have a teenage daughter. But maybe what she's saying is something deeper. She says, if I don't get to kind of give birth, then when I die, I die. There's nothing left of me. Like, it's like the only way for us to touch immortality as humans is through progeny. Some of us, leave behind, like some people are like, like Moshe Rabbeinu, leaves the Torah. Okay, fine. There's a certain like type of surviving a lifetime through that. But the way that humanity continues it through children, and in a sense, she says, I'm as good as dead if I can't be part of that. Just a second, yes.
Yosef actually was the brother who was a slave before he was free. But it was also through him that all the brothers and all on Israel that were saved from the famine, and ultimately the original prophecy that was given to Abraham as the son
It's been up to him.
that was being saved. So sort of connecting it with, she would like to repeat that as though the prophecy was they will hear, they will go into the loop, she wants them to come back. And she's reminding God about that.
You're making a very, very important point. I'm really glad you brought that up. You're pointing out that Rachel of the mothers is the one mother whose child actually did go into slavery, like literally, her son Yosef. It's the same son for whom she prayed and who she wanted so desperately. And he was the one who actually was sold into slavery. And his selling into slavery turned out for the good in the end, meaning we don't know how much the brothers selling him or him knew about Brit ben Abtarim. It's not clear if it was something Avraham shared with his descendants or not. But I think we know, I don't think we know, that Avraham knew that there's going to be a period of exiles and slavery and suffering before his children become a nation and come back to land of Canaan, to Aretz Asher Arecha, right, the land that God showed him. And the selling into slavery of Yosef plays a role in it because he, the son Rachel prayed for and then was sent into slavery, is the one to save his family and bring them safely to Egypt and kind of establish them in Egypt, etc., etc. And becoming a tool in God's hashava letova, as he says, right? That it was God, you guys thought you're doing something bad, but God had a good plan all along, and we were all tools kind of playing our roles in this bigger plan. We'll talk a lot about Yosef and memory in a few weeks. Just a second, guys, ladies. Why is this important to me? Why do I think this is a particularly poignant point that needs addressing? Because when we hear of Rachel crying about sons being taken, being gone, right? Einenu, it's appropriate to look at her life as a foreshadowing of what's happening on the national scale. And it shifts our understanding of what's happening on the national scale, because maybe, if Yosef going into slavery ended up serving a good purpose on a national level, maybe also the children of Israel going into slavery and exile on a national level will play a role for the positive eventually. And in fact, we know that this is how it's perceived because Moshe tells us in Dvarim Lamed, at the end of the bracha and the klala, he tells us, at the end you will fail, you will go into exile, and it is there in exile that you will turn to God in your heart. Your hearts will choose God, and then God will bring you back, and then it'll be a totally different reality of a nation living under God because you will have made it your choice. Now, I'm not saying, and therefore it nullifies the pain and the slavery and the suffering, just like it didn't for Yosef. What he suffered, and the scars of it remain with us throughout history and the troubled history of the relationship between the tribes throughout history. That was repetitive. Sorry. So I think this is a really important point, and thank you. I'm sorry, we're low on time, so I'll take two more comments and then we'll continue. Yes.
Father, Father, husband's not really supporting her and this visual thing of her on the road, let's say, later on the road. She wasn't buried.
With everybody, yeah.
So, then assassination. Not sure I'm about this, but that's what it's,
You're saying, in a sense, that Rachel is a symbol for us, for all of Am Israel, all the children of Israel, not just Ephraim, because she's alone. And that goes back to her personal life, right? She has a husband who loves her dearly, right? Who works, and when all is said and told, 14 years to be able to marry her, but doesn't understand her and doesn't like offer her support when she bears her pain to him. She has children whom she never gets to see grow up and develop adult relationships with. Her sister is also her rival. Imagine what that does to your relationship. And she is buried alone. She is not buried in Ma'arat al-Machpelah with everybody at the end of the road. She is buried on the road. And I want to actually apologize for everybody because we have to continue I'll try and reopen the conversation later, but I want to actually focus for a second on that, on the image of Rachel on the road. Rachel is buried on the road, and it's perceived as not okay by her children. There's this beautiful conversation in the Agadita, if you look at the bottom of page 4. Just a minute. Sorry, I meant box 4. I apologize. Actually, it's not here. I'm sorry. This is it's about the same theme, but it's a different midrash. There's a midrash that Yosef complains to Yaakov on his deathbed, that Yaakov is begging Yosef to bury him in Ma'arat Machpelah, and he kind of needs to make a case as to why he deserves to be married in Ma'arat Machpelah when Yosef's mother isn't. And Yosef is like, how come you didn't bury my mother there? Why should I bury you there? And Yaakov has to make a case for it and explain it. And the Midrash goes from there to say that it's not a mistake. And I'll say it deeper than that. There's Rachel's burial on the road is Yaakov's fault, according to the Midrash, but not in the way Yosef imagines. Yosef imagined that it's just neglect or carelessness or not caring enough about her. The Midrash says no. The reason she dies young is because Yaakov cursed her. When Lavan came and said, you took my trafim, not knowing that it was Rachel, Yaakov says, whoever took it, curse be upon them. And it's this curse that kind of shapes the rest of Rachel's very short life. And the Midrash talks of Yaakov and Rachel as people who stumbled on their journey. Here, this part is in this Agatha, so let's read it. And God remembered Rachel. This means that her mighty ones stumbled in their journey. It's a pasuk from Nahum. Her mighty ones refers to Jacob and Rachel, whom the Holy One, blessed be He, remembered and settled the account that He had promised Abraham. Thus shall your seed be. What you mentioned, Brit Ben Abtarim. However, they stumbled in their journey. As Yaakov said, with whomever you find your gods, he shall not live. This is an oath he made to Lavan. He went to Rachel and did not know what had happened and what caused her death on the way. As it says, and as for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way. The phrase, they stumbled in their journey, is compared to a shepherd who saw a wolf entering to snatch a lamb, took a stone to throw at the wolf, and went after the lamb. Just misfire. Similarly, Jacob cursed and thought he was cursing Lavan, not knowing that his curse was falling on his own sheep, as it says, and Yaakov did not know. Rachel means mother sheep, yes. Therefore, Rachel died on the way. And why did she die in Bethlehem? The Holy One, blessed be He, said, my children need her here. In the hour when they sin and steal, and she remembers me, just as I remembered her. As it is said, that said the Lord, a voice is heard in Ramah, Rachel weeping for her children. He said to her, "Restrain your voice from weeping. And what reward does she have for her days being cut short and dying on the way? It is that she remembers me on behalf of my children, reminds me on behalf of my children, as it says, there is reward for your deeds, said the Lord, and your children shall return to their own border." I think this midrash hides in it something much deeper than like the sum of the parts, or, sorry, I'll explain. The midrash says two things. One, Rachel died on the road because of a stumble on the part of Yaakov. He stumbled, not knowing all the facts. In a state of ignorance, he made a hasty and careless pronouncement that ended up hurting her. It raises all kinds of problems. We're not the Greeks. We don't believe in tragedy. We believe in free choice. We're not going to go into that right now. He says another thing, which is Rachel suffers. She dies on the road. She's buried on the road. Her reward is that she'll be there where her kids need her to be when they go on their own road. I think what's happening here is deeper. I think this is a reflection on the vicissitudes of process, on what it means to live in a world where things are not perfect, where things develop and evolve. And in order to become the people we're supposed to become, we have to go through difficulties. We have to stumble and learn from our stumbles. We have to make mistakes and learn from our mistakes. This is what it means to be human. This is what it means to live in time. We're not born, either as individuals or as a nation, with all the answers. And even those answers we get, think Matan Torah and Har Sinai, we need to grow before we're able to really accept them. The Midrash says that we only really accepted the Torah in the days of Achashverosh. We needed to be far away and not hear God's voice to make the choice to embrace God fully, just like Moshe told us in Dvarim Lamed, that only when we go into exile will we be able to really fully embrace our covenant with God, because then it's not going to be God dragging us along. It's going to be us making the choice to see God in history and choose God in history and bind ourselves to God in history. So that's what it means to live in process. And it means that there's a lot of pain along the way. Because along the way, what does it mean to stumble and make mistakes and grow from them? You know, when we think about raising our children, it can mean something small like touching the fire and learning from it not to touch fire. Or, you know, eating too much sweets and throwing up and realizing maybe it's not worth it, which, by the way, never worked for any child ever. I tried. But in real life, a stumble might mean that you don't protect your borders properly and thousands of people die. In real life, a stumble might mean you make the wrong alliance and the king of Babylon comes and destroys you and you go for exile for thousands of years. Many of your children never come back, ever. And even those who came back come back scarred. In real life, a stumble might mean you feel uncomfortable with the situation around you, but you decide that going to Israel is insane because there's nothing there and it's under the British mandate, and your whole family dies in Auschwitz. Real life costs are not your finger gets burned. So this is what it means to live in time. It means to live with stumbles and the cost of stumbles and having to somehow not lose hope when the cost is unbearable. And Rachel has become very beloved for Jewish people throughout history, I think exactly because that's where she stands. She stands on the road. She stands in a place where things are incomplete. She is the figure of a mother who didn't get to see her children grow up, who didn't get to see the happy ending, who didn't even get to be buried in the family plot because she didn't complete her journey there. And she is the one whose life is marked by stumbles, her own and other people's, and process, and trying to get the right thing, but then getting the wrong sister, or trying to get the right thing, but not getting pregnant after you finally married the man you love, or trying to do the right thing and have children, and then it killing you in the end. And she calls her son Ben Oni. which can mean the sun of my strength, but seems pretty clearly to mean the sun of my mourning in the text. This is Rachel. She is the woman who lives in process and in difficulty. But when we meet her here crying for her children, what we learn from it, and of course, this is an image, right? It's not actual Rachel physically standing there, but what it means is she never gave up caring for her children. All these stumbles, all these costs, all this being in process and never seeing the completed process, never seeing the happy ending, never seeing the full picture, doesn't stop her from caring and praying and looking at the future. We see it through the prism of grief, but grief means that there's also hope and care. And we need her as a reminder, because when we stumble and our world comes crashing down, singing Am Yisrael Lo Mefachad Miderech Aruka is nice, but seeing someone who holds that space for us, and as Rachel does, gives us something in the inside. I want to, before we kind of reopen the discussion in a different direction, I want to take you back with me to the beginning of the war. The war, as you all know, started on Simchat Torah. A few weeks later was Yom P'tirata Shel Rachel Imenu. And the women of my community all gathered. I forgot, I think Migdal Oz or one of the Midrashot put out like a prayer service, a printable prayer service for our soldiers, for the Chatufim, for Yom P'tirat Rachel Imenu. So we all gathered in the house of our friend Rachel Goldberg, who often hosted those kinds of things because she and Avi, Zichrono Livracha, have a big house, and we called them the Matnas of Makor Chaim. Like they always hosted these kind of things. So we all sat in our house, many, many women together of the community. Some of us buried loved ones days earlier. Many, many of us, not myself, but many of us had husbands or sons fighting. All of us were still in this state of shock we were in 2 years ago, and fear and concern. And there we are praying in memory of Rachel and asking for good results for people. And Rachel asked me to speak on the spot. So I said at the time that Rachel, the figure of Rachel, there's a lot of Rachels here, is significant, I think, in moments of confusion and uncertainty and pain, because we think of her as a mother and we think of her as on the road. And those two things are intrinsically related. What does a mother do? A mother raises the child, conceives, birth, raises the child. That means to be on the road. That means to be in process. Just as going on a journey physically means being in process. And in both motherhood and fatherhood also, and journeying, one of the truths that shape your experience is that you may have hopes about the destination. I mean, who here is a mother? I'm asking you now, who here is a mother? I think you would agree with me that we have a lot of hopes about our children, right? We have a lot of aspirations, hopes, desires. We want to see them. I mean, I'm speaking from having young kids, right? Healthy, find a good army service, good profession, marry well, have children of their own, live a happy, fulfilled life. I think people here who have older children can add different layers of hope and aspiration, but it's not in our control. None of it is in our control. At any given moment that I am treating my child, all I can do is take care of the next step. I once woke my husband when I was pregnant with my first son, my first child. I woke him up in tears. I'm like, what if I don't like his wife? He thought I'm crazy, but he checked it down as pregnancy hormones. That's exactly it. I can't control who his wife is going to be. Definitely not when he's a fetus in my belly. We don't live in an age of, contracting engagements at that point. All I can worry about is, do I have the equipment I need for after the birth? And then once I have the baby, I can nurse him and breastfeed him and, you know, swaddle him, whatever. But I can't worry now about what school he's going to get into. And once he's in school, I can help him deal with, you know, scholarly or social situations that arise, but I can't worry now about the army service because it's just irrelevant. It's not in my hands right now. And the same true of journey. We may have a destination, but as I drive to my destination, let's say I decide I want to go to the Hermon right now, just throwing a place. If I start thinking now, what turn should I take in 2 hours? I'm likely to bump into a car in front of me right now. I need to focus on the next turn, the next step. And in times of great confusion and great difficulty and great uncertainty, all we can hold on to are those things that Rachel teaches us, being on the road and being a mother, and that is the next step. I keep thinking about that time in Rachel's house early in the war. I kept thinking about it later when we mourned Avi, and I keep thinking about it now when Rachel, Baruch Hashem, is married as of this week. And remarried with a wonderful man, not forgetting Avi, not leaving Avi behind, carrying him with her into this new home that she's building, which, as she said in the wedding, is a new floor, a new floor that's built as a new floor out of everything that came before. And the wedding really gave it a lot of presence, meaning like the pole bearers, is that how you call it? The people who hold the poles of the chuppah? Or oh, no. Sorry, I mean the people who hold the chuppah in place. Sorry. Okay, this is really grim here. The people who held the chuppah poles were her brother, Aminadav, her new husband's brother, Avi's brother, and Aminadav's wife's previous wife, like who died of cancer a few years ago, Noah's brother. So like it's the whole family was there on all four sides, I should say. And I keep thinking though about that could we have imagined 2 years ago in Rachel's house where we would be today? No. We're on the road, and on the road, all you do is you focus on the next step. So when Rachel is crying for us on the road, it's not just Rachel, the physical Rachel or the spirit of Rachel, it's she who symbolizes our awareness of being on the road, of never knowing how it's all going to end, of having to focus on the next thing. And God is addressing us at that place where we're on the road and we don't know where it goes. And he says, hold on to hope. Don't give up on hope. This is the space Rachel holds for us in our imagination. However, I think that there's another layer or another point or insight we can draw from this conversation between Rachel and God if we go back to the previous iteration of memory, of God remembering her in her lifetime. And for that, we're going to go back to box number 1. This is one of those times when the word memory is in fact mentioned explicitly. Pasuk Bereshit Lamed, Pasuk of Bet, Va'izkor Elokim et Rachel, Va'ishma elea Elokim, Ve'iftach et Rachma. God remembered Rachel, God heeded her, and opened her wombs. And the question is, what does it mean God remembered her? Right? What does it mean God remembered? What, he forgot about her? We talked a little bit about that weird language of memory in relation to God last week when we talked about the Mabul. But what does it mean here specifically? What is God remembering here specifically? And when you look at the Parshanim, and that's why I divided some of them to box 1 and some of them to boxes 2 and 3, there's actually different ways of answering this question. The first way tries to find something Rachel did that merits reward. And then the meaning it casts on the word memory is that God remembered something she did to merit children. It doesn't answer the question why it happens exactly here and not years earlier or something like that, but it imbues the word memory with a sense of remembering a cause for reward. If in a way it reminds me of a Achashverosh, right, who's having a sleepless night, and then he asks his servants to read in Sefer HaZichronot, and he sees that Mordechai did something good for him. He saved him from Biktan Bateresh, and he deserves a reward. And he says, okay, but he didn't get a reward then, so I'm going to reward him now. I'm not saying God doesn't fall asleep and needs help from servants, but that's what it means, memory, in that regard. I want to look at some of the examples because I think they're telling. Let's look at Rashi, okay? In the first box, the Rashi. Vayizkor Elokim et Rachel, and God remembered Rachel. You will find it familiar. He remembered it to her as a merit that she had transmitted the secret signs to her sister, right? And that she was greatly troubled lest she should fall to Esav's lot if Jacob was to divorce her because she was childless. In other words, two things that he remembers. One is the same thing that Rashi says God remembers for her when she cries in Ramah, namely giving the signs to her sister. And the second here is he counts it as a merit for her that she is worried about ending up Esav's wife, which sounds very bizarre to us, right? Why would she end up as Esav's wife? But it's a strand that exists in the Midrash. Like the Midrash in several places alludes to the sense of expectation that existed in Lavan's family, that there are two sons of Rivka, there are two sons of two daughters of Lavan, and that somehow they should contract marriages between them. Ironically, perhaps, a different Midrash attributes the same merit to Leah. If you look at the bottom of box 1 in Bava Batra, right, there's a discussion why, like when we talk about Yaakov deciding who is the firstborn, right? B'ni Bechori, who is his firstborn? There's a discussion about who should have been the firstborn, and it says it is appropriate for the child receiving the status of firstborn to emerge from Rachel. As it is written, these are the generations of Jacob, Yosef, Ele Toldot Yaakov, Yosef. He was the one who should have been the firstborn, indicating that Joseph was Jacob's primary progeny. But Leah advanced ahead of Rachel, I should say, in God's eyes, yes, not in some weird competition like reality TV or something, with appeals for mercy, i.e. with prayer, and thereby earned the status as firstborn for her firstborn. But because of the modesty that Rachel possessed, etc., 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 we're not going to talk about that. Rav said, like one line later, her eyes, in describing Leah and how she's her Rakot, her eyes were literally weak. And this is not a denigration of her, but a praise of her. The context here is that the Chachamim are uncomfortable with Tanakh being denigrating of Leah. Why call out her eyes as being weak? Why describe her like that? Tanakh is so careful to say behema lo tehora instead of behema tme'ah in various places. Why are you talking about Leah so cruelly, so harshly? It says no. It's actually a point of good praise. As she would hear people at the crossroads coming from the land of Canaan before her marriage, who would say, Rebecca has 2 sons and her brother Lavan has 2 daughters. The older daughter will be married to the older son, and the younger daughter will be married to the younger son. And she would sit at the crossroads and ask, what are the deeds of the older son? The passers-by would answer, he is an evil man and he robs people. Just when she wants to hear about your prospective husband. She would ask, what are the deeds of the younger son? They would answer, he is a quiet man dwelling in tents. And because she was so distraught at the prospect of marrying the evil brother, she would cry and pray for mercy until her eyelashes fell out. So Leah is actually associated in Chazal with prayers for mercy, with asking God to change her fate. More than Rachel. Rachel cries here, like historically, centuries later, millennia later, right? Her image is crying for her children. But Leah is the one who cries early on, to the point that her eyes are weak or her lashes fell off, according to some explanations, because she cries so much, because she doesn't want to accept reality as it's presented to her, her place in the world as the one who's intended for the older son, is a place she doesn't want to accept. And it's interesting, isn't it, that according to the Midrash, it's this crying, this refusal to accept reality that becomes the merit that she is, because of that, gets what she wanted. And by only when Rachel learns to cry in the same way for the same reason, that she doesn't want to end up with a sub, she wants a future with Yaakov, does God remember her that as a merit. I once saw a play that kind of fictionalized the story by wonderful Talmidot Chachamot. It was years ago. I was a kid in elementary school and I still remember it. And what I remember is that Rachel in the story is trying to negotiate with Leah for the Dudaim. And Leah tells her, you're putting your emphasis in the wrong place. You want a child? You need to cry until your eyelashes fall off. What I liked about this interpretive kind of creative play is that it really points out that, in a sense, maybe Rachel had to learn from Leah. That Leah was the one who was given a hand she didn't want early on and had to learn to reject it, to cry for it, to hold on hope for a different outcome. And maybe Rachel learned it from her sister, her rival, when she didn't want the hand that was given to her of being a barren woman without children carrying on her name. However, I want to point out that the two things Rashi says are different. There's an essential difference between them. One is something Rachel did that had nothing to do with her desire for children. I mean, obviously did, because by marrying her sister, she created this complicated situation for herself. But by whatever, you understand what I'm saying. She didn't marry her sister. By letting her sister marry Yaakov. However, it's something she did to another person. She was kind and considerate. She thought about her sister's potential shame if she's exposed in the wedding night or in the wedding evening under the wedding canopy. And she cared more for her sister's shame than she did for her interests. And that's what God remembers for her here, and according to Rashi, also for all the generations to come. Right? That's the merit, the special merit that she holds. The second thing focuses on prayer, on not wanting to accept reality, on the distress that comes from not wanting your journey, your road, your process to take you a certain way. And that is, in fact, another strand in the interpretation. If I'm jumping to box 3, to the very bottom, Midrash Tanchuma Toldot. Why were the matriarchs barren? Rabbi Levi said in the name of Rabbi Shilav, Kfar Tmart, I can't say that, and Rabbi Helbo said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, because the Holy One, blessed be He, desired to hear their prayers. The Holy One, blessed be He, had stated, they are wealthy and beautiful, and if we should also grant them sons, they will not pray to me. It's a very famous midrashic sentence. I don't want to go into the fairness or lack thereof of it. I think the point is very poignant. Just like Hashem gives us a land where we don't have a great river and instead we depend on rain, so we have to ask, God wants the people who are at the highest level to depend on Him in some way, to open a place for a relationship, to open a place for a partnership. If they have everything they need in their life, if everything is good and great, they don't need God. Maybe they'll pray perfunctorily, like, moderni, etc. But on a deep level, they can go on fulfilling their life's mission without any reference to God. They don't need Him as a partner. So God creates a world where we do need Him as a partner. And Rachel's merit is perhaps not so much what she did to her sister, but rather it's the prayer itself. Now, there's a way to kind of hold both ends, and this is what the sources in box 2 go more in their direction, where they basically say that there's two separate things. There's the memory. God remembers Rachel and what she did and her merits all the time. He doesn't need reminders. But what needs to change for that memory to translate into action is she needs to take action first. If you look at Sforno, for example, God remembered Rachel. He remembered the efforts she made to produce offspring for Yaakov by giving him her maidservant and acquiring the Dudaim. And Elohim perceived, Vaishma ele Elohim. After she made the two efforts mentioned above, she then prayed to him and he heard her prayers. Meaning the merit here is the efforts she made individually, but all these merits, he's aware of them, he remembers them, but they're not going to be answered until she turns to him in prayer. Or Chaim says it also. If you look in the next source, we hear from this verse that although Rachel's plight was on God's mind, Hagam she'ala zichona lefanav, she also needed to pray in order to conceive and give birth. This is why the Torah added, God heard. This verse also informs us that God remembers his pious ones even before they cry out to him. This is why the Torah first mentions the fact that God remembered Rachel. Let's, as we say in Hebrew, na'aseh seder. Let's organize all these different ideas. And here I'm less interested in pursuing what every parshan understands. I'm interested in kind of mapping out a bigger chiluk, okay, between them. The question is where you put the emphasis. Is the emphasis on memory or on hearing, Vaishma? The first thing Rashi says is more about the memory. God remembers something Rachel did to deserve children, and he gives her the reward that she's due, really. She's due this reward. The second say, God remembers us always. God knows, God has a tally of everything we did. God is aware of all the good things always. That's not enough. The dagesh, the thing that changes reality, is Vaishma, right? It's the hearing. It's meaning she needs to ask for it. She needs to turn to God and pray for it and ask for it and bring God into her life in this way. Like make herself say, God, I want to partner with you. Like Hannah says when she prays for a child, right? Give me a child and I'll raise him to do your will. But that's what it means. We say that there's three partners in every conception, right? The parents and God. But here it's making it explicit, saying, God, I need your partnership in this. I need you to partner with me in this. And that's the emphasis. And everything else, God remembers always. He doesn't need those reminders. The merits are there. Kvodam bimkomam munach, right? But God is not going to act on it without the prayer. Now, I want to take this distinction and bring it back, and I'm going back to box 4, to the question we started with originally, which was, why is God rewarding Rachel? Presumably, all the patriarchs and matriarchs wanted what was good for their children, and presumably they all had a lot to say for themselves in terms of their own merits, right? Excuse me. And I want to show that here too, we can go in those two directions. We can say that what God sees when he looks at Rachel crying is things she did that merit a reward. That's Rashi's answer, right? That she gave the simanim, or how the Midrash elaborates. It's very beautiful, right? That she made room in her life, like she suffered the fact that she has a rival for her husband's affection. She controlled her jealousy and was considerate. So why you, God, should control your jealousy and be considerate and forgiving of your children? Can't be that I have more mercy for my sister, for my for the people around me, than you have mercy for your son. So that really focuses on the merit, something historical Rachel did to merit. But, and I don't remember who raised the option that maybe it's about the crying, it's about the prayer. I think you did, right? Maybe the emphasis is not on memory, but on the kol barama, nishma Rachel mevaka et banea. That Rachel, the woman who died on the road, the woman who never saw the completion of the family life she envisioned, who never saw her kids grow up, she is also the woman who holds on to this desperate hope against hope that things will work out. She is, like you said, channeling, kind of holding that space, making that energy in the world of hoping even in times of darkness and uncertainty. And this is what God rewards. Just a moment. This is what God rewards. the crying, the prayer, the refusal to accept reality as it is, the refusal to say Hashem natan v'Hashem lakach, the refusal to say gam zu l'tova, the refusal to live in a state of complacency, a refusal that is represented through her grief and tears. I have one last point I want to make, but yes.
What's the real meaning of Rivaka? Not Bocha. I mean,
Mhm.
a lot of people cry, but the word that's used specifically for Rachel is Rivako. Is it TL? Is it Giggle? Is she causing others to cry, or is it just a strong cry? But I think that word is significant also, because a lot of people just rest it, but look at what Rachel did. All in my point, she did something for her sister that was unusual. And therefore, she has the ability to cause others to cry, to have this ability to do it. Live not just leave quote, live
You're putting the emphasis on the word mevaka, which is different from bachta, bocha, right? It's like, it sounds like she's making others cry. Also, it's not the way it's traditionally understood. Usually it's understood as mournful, kind of like levakot is like it's an act of crying that's not just spontaneous. It's like a kind of almost a ritual, a ceremony. But I think what you're saying also has a lot of validity, even though it's not the traditional. I don't think that matters. That she has the ability to make us cry throughout the generation. What she did was so unusual and unnatural, bringing our rival into our own home, that it's something about it. It goes beyond. It pierces beyond other acts of chesed. So I'm glad you talk about chesed, because that brings me to the point with which I want to wrap up our conversation today. And that is, I'm going back to our calendar and to the vicinity or the kind of neighborly relations between the Yortzeit of Rachel and Zayin B'Cheshvan. Okay, it's not in your sources. We started by talking about Zayin B'Cheshvan and about how in Zayin B'Cheshvan or it represents, or the time before Zayin B'Cheshvan, really between Shmini Atzeret and Zayin B'Cheshvan, represents the call to be considerate, not to just let truth and justice and what we need override what other people around us need. That theme of caring for others as related to the prayer for rain comes throughout our tradition. Throughout our tradition. There's a source I didn't bring, that's why I have my phone here, from Bereshit Rabbah 33, where there's a description about a particular time of drought. Thank you for that, drought, where nothing helped. Like they did ta'anit, the Chazal did ta'anit, nothing helped. So they said, go and give money to the poor. And everybody took some money and went to give money to the poor. And somebody noticed that one man was giving money to his divorced wife, to the woman he divorced. And they asked him, why? You don't like her. You had an acrimonious divorce. You're no longer responsible for her. And he said, I know, but I couldn't see her in her suffering and not help her. And then the rabbis come back to God and says, you know, this is the mercy your people show to each other, even the people they don't like and had a fight with and like a long history of acrimony with, but they show them mercy, and immediately God brought rain to the world. And it's all a perush of Tov Hashem lechol ma'asav. But like when we are good to Maaseh Hashem, when we're good to each other, God wants to be good for us. So it's a different connection between consideration of others and rain than in Zayin Cheshvan, but I think it's all there. I'll take it a step further. Rachel shows us that it's consideration of others, considerateness towards others, that God particularly values and sees as a merit. And Rachel and Zayin Cheshvan have another thing in common. We have this idea, and it repeats itself in countless midrashim, that there are three things, right, that are only in the hands of God. Three maftechot. Maftech leida, chaya, the birth of a child, the conception and birth of a child. Maftech kshamim, and maftech mita. Death, birth, and rain are in the hands of God. Occasionally, God lets someone take one of the maftechot, like Eliyahu took maftech kshamim, but that's unusual. That's a perversion of the order of things as it's supposed to be. I think there's something very powerful in seeing that both maftech kshamim, which we think about today on Zayin Cheshvan, and Meftach Leida, which was such a central part of Rachel's experience in her life, not having that key, wanting that key, working for that key, and then praying for the children for all the generations to come. There's something very powerful about the idea that in both those cases, we are told through Rashi, through the Midrash, that yes, we don't have control of rain and we don't have control of birth, but when we are considerate of one another, God uses those keys on our behalf. When we restrain our natural emotions and desires like Rachel, when we restrain our pursuit of our interests, like not praying for rain, even though we need the rain right now, or giving money to our divorcee, or just helping each other, that's when God takes these keys that are in his hands and uses them on our behalf. And in this moment in history, yesterday, a soldier fell in Gaza. There's so much unknown. There's a lot more clarity than there was those 2 years ago when we sat with Rachel, all the women of the community, but so much uncertainty still hangs over our heads. We're still in the process, we're still on the road, and we still can only focus on the next step. If we want God to use the key of death on our behalf as well, and not, and spare us, perhaps those 2 other keys, as represented in Zayin Cheshvan and in Yom Ptirat Rachel Imenu, can hint to us or guide us that we don't control a lot. But what we do control as we're on the road, as we're in this process, is how considerate we are of the people around us. And in the merit of this consideration we give to one another, may we see softer and better days. Bezrat Hashem. Thank you. And what? Sorry?